Hi everyone, it's Eliana and I have this cute 3D card to share with you today. I am using the Concord and 9th City Stacks stamp set. I am stamping on a half sheet of Gina Turquoise C. And you could use one MISTI for this if I would have planned a little bit better. I could have figured that out a little bit sooner, but I ended up using two original MISTIs for this part. I am using my Ink on 3 hybrid Blackout ink. It is a versatile ink. You could Copic color with it, you could watercolor with it, and so I just pulled that out to use because I'm going to be using my Polychromos pencils. I'm not going to show too much of the coloring because it's just simple colored pencil coloring, nothing fancy. I decided to use the Turquoise C because I wanted to create a scene where there was a sky in the background, and I didn't want the edge of the die cuts to be distracting. So if I would have used white cardstock, you would have seen the white border around the trees and the homes. Now what I'm using here is a marker that I found at Hobby Lobby. It's an Artist Loft blending marker, and you could see that it will allow you to blend your colored pencils so that you don't really see the pencil lines. So it kind of like, I'm not sure if there's a solvent in it. It's probably something like Gamsol, but I found it much easier than to use the pencil nubs because you have to keep dipping the pencil nubs into the Gamsol because it does run out, and this is kind of a marker, and so you just keep coloring with it. When you want to change colors, you just scribble until the color is off the tip of the marker, so you could use it for different colors. I decided to make this card because we did have some new neighbors move in down the street, and I thought it would be kind of nice to show them that this is kind of what I do for a living. And so when I met them, they just kind of looked at me like, oh, you make cards. So I think they're not sure what to make of me yet, but hopefully they'll be great neighbors. They seem pretty nice. Now that everything's all blended and colored in, I'm going to go ahead and overstamp. So I'm going to put my images back into the MISTI, and I'm just double checking that I'm pushing my paper into the correct corner. And now I'm going to use my VersaFine Clair Nocturne ink to stamp over. I like to use this ink because it's very, very black and it stays wet long enough that I could do some clear embossing. As I've said in previous videos, this is my favorite technique when I do any kind of coloring. I think it just adds a little bit of pop to the images. Now I'm adding some clear embossing powder. This is from Brutus Monroe, and the name of this embossing powder is ICICLE. And once I have it covered, I like to thump it to knock off any of the stray embossing powder. I didn't use my embossing bag. I was worried that it would dull the images, and so I just decided to wing it. I figured if I got extra embossing powder, then it wouldn't be too noticeable since it was clear. Now I'm just using the welcome die that is in this set, and I had cut 3 of them and stacked them together, and I wanted to see where I could trim this down. So by just placing it there, it allows me to figure out where to trim my cardstock. Now I'm using my cut-a-line. There is a centering ruler on the cut-a-line, and so I'm just using it to center the welcome on my card panel, and I'm using the edges of the MISTI with the lines on the cut-a-line to make sure that my sentiment is straight. Just because I'm so close to the edge, I can't really use the L-shaped ruler from the creative corners. I want to make sure that I got it perfectly straight, and so I'm just stamping on a piece of acetate to make sure that it is straight on there. Since I did a little bit of embossing, the card panel is a little bit warped, and so I'm just using a bar magnet to hold it down. And now I'm stamping the second line of my sentiment onto my card panel. Once again, I'm going to use some ICICLE embossing powder so that it's all matchy-matchy. And I will heat set that with my heat gun. I'm lining up the dies that come in the set, and I'm going to run it through my Gemini die cutter. And once I have all my pieces cut, I'm going to create my background. So the background I want to use is the little cloud die that comes in the set. So I've taken the other half of that cardstock that I cut down, and I'm just using the die that has the cloud border on it. Once I do that, I'm going to start creating my background. Now I've used purple tape, and purple tape doesn't rip your paper, but for some reason it was really stuck onto this piece of cardstock. As you can see, I'm just trying to peel it off this one end, and my nails can't pull it up, so I use my craft pick to lift up the edge. And you can see that even though it is super stuck down, it does not rip my paper at all. I end up cutting this apart right here on the edges, and I should have just left it together just a little bit longer because I realized that I need to add a little bit of white to the background. So I used the top half of the die cut to create a stencil, and this is where I realized where I should have just left it all together, because now I'm taping it back together. What I plan to do is to use some white Gina K pigment ink with a Picket fence blender brush, and I'm just going to add some clouds just so that it looks a little bit nicer on my background. And so I want to bring it down, but I don't want it to look the same, so I thought, well, I'll flip it over. But I don't want the ink that's on the purple tape to smudge my panel, so I'm just going to wipe everything off with a microfiber towel. And pigment ink stays wet, so you're able to wipe it off. And so now I'm just going to add a little bit more to create a cloud scene in the background. And I don't know if I've gone far enough, so I'm going to start laying down my pieces just to see where everything is going to fall. And so you just have to snip the very edges of the die cut. And so this is about what I want it to look like, so I just need a little bit, another little cloud set. And you do want to heat set your pigment ink because it does stay wet a little bit longer. I didn't show that in the video, but I did use my heat gun to heat set it. Now on the edges of the die, there is a little nick on the very end, and that tells you where you need to score. And so I'm just using my score buddy to create the score lines, and I'm using my Teflon bone folder. It's a little bit hard to do it upside down. I'm so used to scoring from top down. It was a little awkward to go down up. So now I want to piece my backgrounds together, and once again I'm using the little notch that's on the edge of the die cut, and you just want to put that notch right in the groove, and you might need to slide your paper over if your notch is not in the groove. And then I'm going to add a little bit of strong adhesive. And I'm just going to peel up the edges. I really wasn't sure how to piece it together. I should have watched the video that Concord and 9th has on their website, but I just thought I would just wing it. Sometimes when I go online to see how things are done, I end up scrolling and I end up watching like 10 different videos, and then I forget why I went on to the internet to begin with, so I decided just to figure it out on my own. So I'm adding a little bit more score tape to the edges, and I didn't notice this when I started, was that one end of the tab is bigger than the other, so I do have to be careful on making sure that it's not wonky when I place it inside. So I'm trying to figure that out now. So, and then I think I have it down, and then I'm wondering if I tape it while it's like this, my sentiment might be crooked, so I need to go trim the bottom just to make sure that I'm going to be straight. And I pull off this piece of release tape, and then I figure out, well, I need to go trim it first or else it's going to get stuck. So I've trimmed it down, and now I'm able to use my tabletop as a guide to lining things up. And for some reason I still got it wrong, so I'm just going to pull everything apart, and luckily I didn't tear anything. So I'm going to try it one more time. So you can see on this view that one tab is longer than the other. So by setting it on the tabletop, I can get one side down and then adjust the other one. Hopefully this card doesn't fall apart when I give it to my neighbor. Now I want to add the welcome, and this is the little piece that I die cut 3 times, and I use stick-it adhesive, and so I have stacked them all together to create the welcome here, and I'm just going to adhere it down to the front. I'm going to use my bone folder to press it down, and you can see that sometimes when you get die cuts, you get like these little fibers that are stuck to your die cut. They're like little hairs. I'm going to take a stiff brush, and I'm just going to brush away all of those pieces. Sometimes I use tape, but other times they're just stuck in between the layers of the stacked die that it's hard to get them off, but by using a stiff brush you're able to do that. Now I'm noticing that the edges are uneven, and that really bothers me, and so I just measured with my cut line to know where I need to trim. So I'm just going to trim the very edge of it so that it stands even. So here you are. Thanks so much for stopping by. I hope you've enjoyed this video, and don't forget to give it a thumbs up and to hit that subscribe button. Have a great day. Bye.